I still remember the sound before I saw it, the hollow thud of leather hitting water. A sound that should have meant nothing, yet tore through the quiet of that October evening like a scream. I was standing on my porch, a cup of tea trembling in my hands, when I saw her, Vivian Hale, my daughter-in-law, my late son's widow, the woman I'd once trusted with everything that mattered. Her silver sedan roared down the gravel road that led to Silent Lake, the headlights slicing through the mist. I knew that road. Michael and I used to walk it every summer evening when he was a boy, catching fireflies in jars, promising we'd never lose each other. No one drove like that down to the water. Not unless they were running from something or someone. She stopped so abruptly that dust rose like smoke behind her. The driver's door flung open, and Vivian stumbled out. Her hair was a mess, her pale dress clinging to her with sweat. I could see even from the porch how her shoulders shook. Then she opened her trunk. There it was, a brown leather suitcase, the one I'd given her as a wedding gift 9 years ago. I could still remember tying the satin ribbon on it and saying, "So you can carry your dreams everywhere." She pulled it out roughly. It looked heavy, so heavy she had to lean her whole body to keep it from falling. Then she looked around quick, terrified glances, as if the trees themselves might be watching. "Vivian," I called. My voice echoed, but she didn't hear me or didn't want to. She staggered to the edge of the dock. The lake was still, a sheet of glass reflecting the first stars of evening. She swung the suitcase once, twice. Then, with a guttural sound I'd never heard from her, she threw it. The splash shattered the calm. Ripples spread wide, the surface swallowing the last glint of the setting Sunday. For a moment she just stood there, frozen. Then she pressed both hands to her face and let out a sound half sob, half growl before she turned, ran to the car, and sped away. The taillights vanished into the dusk. My teacup slipped from my hand and shattered on the porch. I didn't even flinch. My body moved before my mind caught up. I ran. The gravel bit into my bare feet. Every step jolted my bones, but I didn't stop. The only thought in my head was, what's in that suitcase? When I reached the dock, it was still floating barely, the leather darkened by water, the edges sinking lower. I stepped into the lake. The cold hit me like knives. My breath caught, but I waded deeper. The mud sucked at my feet. My skirt clung to my legs. I reached out, fingers brushing the handle. It slipped once, twice, then I caught it and pulled. It was so heavy I thought I'd break in half. Then, a sound. A muffled, desperate noise from inside. A tiny sound, but so human that every cell in my body froze. No, no, dear God, please no. I dragged harder, heart pounding in my ears. When I finally pulled it to shore, I fell to my knees beside it. My hands shook as I gripped the zipper. It was slick, jammed, stubborn. I clawed at it until my nails bent back. "Come on," I whispered through my teeth. "Come on." The zipper gave. I opened it, and my whole world stopped. Inside, wrapped in a soaked blue blanket, was a newborn baby. His skin was pale, his lips tinged violet, his chest barely moving. The umbilical cord was still tied with a string, not a clamp. Whoever had done this hadn't meant for help to come. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. I just stared, shaking, tears streaming down my face. Then instinct took over. I lifted him, cradling his weightless body against my chest. He was cold, so cold, but when I pressed my cheek to his tiny mouth, I felt it, a faint breath, a whisper of life. "Oh, sweetheart," I sobbed. "Hold on, please hold on." I ran back toward the house, the baby pressed against my chest. My feet bled from the stones, my heart thundering like it would burst. Inside, I swept everything off the kitchen table, laid him down on a towel, grabbed the phone. My fingers slipped on the buttons. 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's a baby, I cried. He's not breathing right. He's freezing. He was in the lake. The dispatcher's voice was steady. "Stay with me, ma'am. Keep him warm. Wrap him in a dry towel if you can. Help is on the way." I did as she said, drying him with trembling hands, whispering over and over, "Don't you leave me, little one. Please don't leave me." Minutes stretched into eternities until sirens cut through the night. 2 paramedics burst through the door, a woman with quick, gentle hands and a man carrying equipment. They took the baby from me, wrapped him in heat packs, placed an oxygen mask over his tiny face. Severe hypothermia, the woman said. We need to move. I followed them into the ambulance. I couldn't stop staring at that fragile body amid the wires and beeping machines. How did you find him? The paramedic asked. In a suitcase, I whispered. In the lake. I saw someone throw it in. Her head snapped up. Someone? Who? I hesitated, my throat tightening. The image of Vivian standing by the water burned behind my eyes. My son's widow. The woman who cried on my shoulder at the funeral. Who said Michael was the love of her life. But I said it anyway. I saw Vivian Hale. The paramedic exchanged a look with her partner, a flicker of disbelief, pity maybe. The sirens wailed. The world blurred past the window. And I held on to the only truth I had left, that I had pulled life out of death with my own trembling hands, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and rain. Outside, the storm that had started after the ambulance left my house was still pouring over Silver Creek, washing away the blood from my feet, the tea from the porch, the life I thought I had left behind. They took the baby straight into intensive care. A team of nurses and doctors closed in around him, voices sharp, urgent, precise. I stood frozen in the hallway, my wet clothes dripping onto the tile floor, my mind still echoing with the sound of the suitcase hitting the water. A nurse, Elise Monroe, her name tag said, touched my arm gently. Ma'am, you need to sit, you're shaking. I looked down. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely hold the paper cup of water she'd handed me. Is he alive? They're doing everything they can. She spoke softly, but her eyes told me the truth. It could go either way. She led me to a small waiting room with beige walls and a flickering vending machine. I could still hear the doctors shouting through the double doors, a rhythmic chaos that made my stomach twist. After what felt like hours, a young doctor came out. His hair was damp with sweat, his eyes sunken. The baby's stable for now, he said. But his body temperature dropped dangerously low. The next 24 hours are critical. I nodded, though the words didn't seem real. Stable felt like a thread stretched too thin. The police arrived before dawn. 2 officers, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, and a man who barely spoke. The woman introduced herself as Detective Nora Keaton. Mrs. Whitmore, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. I need you to tell me everything that happened tonight. Her tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. I told her everything. The sound, the car, the suitcase, the splash, the baby. I told her about Vivian, how certain I was it was her. When I finished, she leaned back. And you're absolutely sure it was Mrs. Hale? Yes. She exchanged a look with her partner, who quietly wrote something in his notebook. You said it was around 5:15 p.m. I nodded. She pulled out a photo. It was a still from a security camera, Vivian's silver sedan parked in front of Harris Mart Superstore. The timestamp read 5:21 p.m. According to this, Detective Keaton said, Mrs. Hale was 20 miles away from Silver Creek at the exact time you claim you saw her. My mouth went dry. That can't be. She watched me closely. You've had a difficult year, haven't you, Mrs. Whitmore? I flinched. Your son's death, the funeral, living alone since then. I gripped the arms of the chair. You think I imagined it? I'm not saying that, she said carefully. But trauma can do strange things to memory. Anger flared in my chest. I know what I saw. It was Vivian. That dress, her hair, that car. I know it was her. Keaton's gaze softened, but not with belief, with pity. We'll verify everything, she said, closing her notebook. For now, get some rest. We'll keep you updated. But rest never came. Hours later, Nurse Elise found me still sitting in the same chair, staring at the rain streaking the window. She handed me a cup of hot tea. They say the baby's holding steady, she murmured. That's a good sign. Does he have a name? I asked. She shook her head. No identification, no birth record, nothing. I looked at her then, this woman I'd known for all of 3 hours, who suddenly felt like the only person in the world who wasn't doubting me. He deserves one, I whispered. She smiled faintly. Maybe you'll think of one. But I didn't. Not yet. Because a terrible thought had rooted itself in my mind. What if he was Michael's child? 6 months ago, when we buried my son, Vivian had stood beside me in black silk and crocodile tears. She'd promised to stay close. Promised that Michael had been her only love. And then she disappeared from Silver Creek, selling their house and vanishing somewhere downstate. If she'd been pregnant when he died, she would have hidden it. She'd always been proud, secretive, beautiful, in a cold, unreachable way. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Dear God, if that child is his, let me find the truth before she destroys him too." When I opened them again, Detective Keaton was back. Her expression was different now, more thoughtful, less certain. She sat beside me, a folder in her hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, the baby's blood work came back. There's something you need to know." She opened the file and slid a paper toward me. "The DNA results show a 25% genetic match to you." I stared at her, not understanding. "It means," she said quietly, "that the baby is your biological grandson. He's your son Michael's child." The room tilted. The sound left the world. I gripped the edge of the chair to keep from collapsing. "My grandson." The words barely escaped me. She tried to drown my grandson. Detective Keaton's voice softened. "We're reopening your son's case, Mrs. Whitmore. There are inconsistencies in the crash report. We think your daughter-in-law may have been involved." I pressed my hand to my chest. The clock ticked too loudly. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Keaton asked. But I wasn't listening anymore. Because in that moment, I knew what the lake had given me wasn't just a baby. It had given me a second chance to fight for my son's life through the child he'd never known. And I wasn't going to lose again. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. The storm outside passed, but inside me, the thunder never stopped. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that suitcase sinking again, saw those tiny purple lips, the blanket tangled around him, and the image of Vivian's pale face by the lake. When dawn came on the 3rd day, I was still sitting in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of coffee gone cold. Nurse Elise Monroe found me there. She didn't ask questions. She just sat down beside me with a plate of toast and butter. "Eat," she said softly. "You won't help him by starving yourself." I took a bite, even though my throat felt tight. "Has there been any change?" "His color's better," she said. "His lungs are responding. He's a fighter." A fighter. Just like his father. The words nearly undid me. By noon, Detective Nora Keaton returned. She carried herself like someone who had long since forgotten what rest felt like, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but sharp as glass. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, pulling a chair across from me, "I have more questions about your daughter-in-law." I nodded. "Ask." "When was the last time you saw Vivian before the night of the incident?" 6 months ago, at Michael's funeral. "And before that?" 2 days before the accident." Nora's pen paused. "Did you and she get along?" I hesitated. Get along? What an inadequate phrase for what we'd been. Vivian and I had been cordial in public, the way women are trained to be. Smiles that never reached the eyes. Compliments meant as veiled insults. She thought I was old-fashioned. I thought she was hollow. "No," I said finally, "we didn't." "Did you ever suspect she might have hurt your son?" The question hit me like a slap. "Are you asking if I think she murdered him?" "I'm asking if anything seemed off before his accident." I closed my eyes. That night came back in fragments, the phone call I didn't answer, the headlights that never reached his driveway, the wet pavement, the news that his brakes had failed. There were moments, I whispered. Little things. The way she'd look at him when she thought no one was watching. The way she smiled when people talked about his life insurance. Nora wrote something down, her brow furrowed. "Your instincts might have been right." "What do you mean?" "We had the car re-examined. The brake line was tampered with. The original investigators missed it. The room spun." "You're saying Michael's death wasn't an accident?" Her voice was steady, but low. "We believe it was murder." I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. "And you think Vivian?" "She's our primary suspect." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the rain hitting the windows again, soft and steady like heartbeats. Then I whispered, "She killed him for the money." "Most likely. We found insurance transfers to her account 2 months after his death, $200,000. Then, last week, she emptied everything into an offshore fund. Cayman Islands. She knew she was being watched." I stared past her, into the window's reflection. My own face looked like a ghost's, pale, hollow-eyed, a stranger to herself. "She tried to erase him," I said. "First my son, then his child." Nora leaned forward. "She didn't succeed." "You saved him, Mrs. Whitmore." The question now is whether you can keep him safe." Her words lingered long after she left. That night, Elise walked me to the nursery window. Through the glass, under soft blue lights, I saw him tiny and perfect, his chest rising and falling with a fragile rhythm that felt like a miracle. "He's gaining strength," Elise whispered. "The doctors say his body's stabilizing." I pressed my hand to the glass. "He's all that's left of Michael." Elise smiled gently. "Then he's everything." I didn't have the right to name him yet, but the word came to me like a prayer. Samuel. God has heard. It fit. Because for the first time since the accident, I felt like someone up there had been listening after all. When I got home that evening, I couldn't bring myself to turn on the lights. The house smelled faintly of lavender and rain, the scent of my son's cologne, still lingering in the hallway. On his old desk, I noticed something I hadn't before, a worn notebook half hidden under a stack of unopened mail. It was leather-bound, the initials MW embossed faintly on the corner. Michael's handwriting filled the first page. April 9th. She's pregnant. I found the test in the bathroom drawer. She said it wasn't hers, but I know better. My knees gave out. I sat on the floor, the journal shaking in my hands. Page after page, he'd written about her lies, her temper, her obsession with money. How he'd changed his will to protect his unborn child. How he'd been afraid to tell me until he could prove the truth. The last entry was dated the day before his death. "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. And if something happens to her, look for the child." I pressed the book against my chest and wept. The walls of that quiet house felt like they were listening, holding the echoes of a boy who'd grown up chasing fireflies and ended up dying for love. Somewhere between sobs, I made a promise. To my son. To the baby in that hospital crib. To myself. I would find Vivian Hale. And when I did, she would face the truth she tried to bury at the bottom of Silent Lake. By the end of that week, the whispers had already begun. Neighbors who'd once brought casseroles after Michael's funeral now crossed the street when they saw me. The grocery clerk smiled too wide. Everyone in Silver Creek knew something was happening, they just didn't know what. But I knew. The truth was clawing its way up from the bottom of the lake, same as that suitcase. Detective Nora Keaton came by the house again on Friday afternoon. The same raincoat, the same calm professionalism. But this time she didn't bring her notebook. She brought photographs. She laid them on my kitchen table one by one. The twisted wreck of Michael's car, the shredded brake line, the tool marks along the tubing, deliberate, precise. "It's not a question anymore," she said quietly. "Someone cut them." The photographs blurred as I blinked hard, fighting the tears. "You can prove it was her?" "We're getting there," Nora said. "We traced the purchase of a hydraulic line cutter from an auto supply store 2 days before the crash. Paid in cash. But the security camera caught her plate." My heart stopped. "Vivian's?" "Yes." I wanted to feel vindicated, but what I felt instead was sickness, a hollow ache that ate through my stomach. The woman who'd kissed my son goodnight, who'd stood beside me at his wedding, who'd called me mom. She'd murdered him. "She took everything," I whispered. Nora's eyes softened. "Not everything." I looked up at her. "You have his son, and we're going to make sure that boy grows up safe." That night, I found myself wandering through Michael's old study. His books still lined the shelves, engineering manuals, travel guides, a few novels with folded corners. I ran my fingers over the spines and stopped at one, The Old Man and the Sea. He'd loved that book. Said it made him believe in the quiet strength of people who refuse to give up, even when the world takes everything away. I sat in his chair, the leather creaking under my weight. His journal lay open beside the lamp. I'd been reading it every night, every word, every confession. He had known she was dangerous. He had tried to protect his unborn son. And now, that son was fighting for his life in a hospital room, with no name but the one I'd whispered through glass. "Samuel?" 2 days later, Nora called. "We have a warrant for her arrest," she said. "But she's gone, abandoned her last address in Savannah. No forwarding, no activity on her cards. She's disappeared." "Then find her," I said. "Please. We're trying. But there's something else. The life insurance policy your son had, the one she collected? He'd changed the beneficiary 2 weeks before he died. Not to her. Then to who? To the child. The child she'd tried to drown." I hung up and sat there in silence. The house creaked with the sound of rain on the roof. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called across the lake, a haunting, lonely sound, that used to comfort me. Tonight it felt like a warning. I walked to the window. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, calm, deceptive, hiding its secrets beneath that smooth, perfect surface. That was when I saw it, a faint light moving across the far bank. Headlights? Maybe. Too slow for a car. Too steady for a reflection. I turned off my lamp. The light disappeared. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was my imagination. But something inside me whispered otherwise. The next morning, I went to the hospital again. Elise met me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's out of danger now," she said. "His breathing's strong. You should see him." I followed her to the nursery. Samuel's cheeks were pink now, his fists curled like he was ready to take on the world. "He's beautiful," I murmured. "He's a survivor," Elise said. "He's got his father's will, I think." I turned toward her, startled. She blushed slightly. "I'm sorry, I read his file. I didn't mean to intrude." "It's all right," I said softly. "Michael would have liked you." She smiled. "Then maybe he sent me to help you." When I got home that evening, I found something on the porch steps. A white envelope, no name, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Vivian, standing at the edge of a motel parking lot, wearing the same white dress from that night, holding a cell phone. Smiling. On the back, written in neat black ink, "You shouldn't have gone to the police." I felt the cold crawl up my spine. I looked toward the lake still, silent, endless. She was out there, watching, and I realized then, saving Samuel had only been the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind against the window felt like someone testing the lock. The photograph sat on the table beneath the lamp, its edges curling from the heat. Vivian's smile stared back at me, calm, deliberate, cruel. That smile had once fooled everyone, even Michael. Not anymore. At dawn, I called Detective Nora Keaton. "I found something," I said. "A photo. She left it on my porch." Nora's voice sharpened immediately. "Don't touch it. We'll send a team." "Too late," I said quietly. I already did. Within the hour, 2 officers arrived. They dusted the envelope for prints, photographed my porch, and took the letter as evidence. Nora stayed behind after they left. "She's toying with you," Nora said, her jaw tight. "Classic predator behavior. You frightened her when you went to the police. Now she wants to remind you she's still in control." "I'm not afraid of her," I lied. Nora didn't call me out on it. "We've circulated her picture across state lines," she said. "If she surfaces, we'll know." "And until then?" Nora hesitated. "Lock your doors. Stay armed if you can." That evening, I went to the hospital again. Samuel's incubator was gone. Instead, he lay in a small bassinet, wrapped in a blue blanket. His tiny fingers reached out when he heard my voice. Elise smiled as she walked in. "He recognizes you now," she said. "Every time you come in, his heartbeat picks up." Tears welled in my eyes. "He knows me," I whispered. "He really knows me." "He'll be discharged soon," Elise said. "But Child Services will decide where he goes next. You should prepare yourself. It might not be with you." I turned to her. "He's my grandson." "I know," she said softly. "But the system doesn't care about blood, only about paperwork." I stayed until visiting hours ended, then sat in my car for an hour afterward, hands gripping the steering wheel. They could put him in some stranger's home, some cold place with no love, while I, his grandmother, waited helplessly. No, I wouldn't let that happen. 2 days later, the knock came just after sunrise. A young woman stood at my door, neat gray suit, clipboard, polite smile. "Aline Foster, Child Services." "Mrs. Whitmore," she said. "May I come in?" I let her. She looked around the house, scribbling notes. "Do you live alone?" "Yes." "Stable income?" "My husband's pension and savings." She nodded. "Any medical conditions?" "None that matter." "Any record of mental illness, depression, anxiety?" The words stung. "I lost my son. I grieved. That's not an illness." Her pen paused midair. "I understand. It's just protocol." When she left, I felt stripped bare, like my grief had been dissected and filed into a government form. But I also saw it clearly now. I was being tested, judged, and I would not fail. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. To whom it may concern. I, Margaret Whitmore, am applying for guardianship of my grandson, Samuel. I am 62 years old, retired, financially independent, and emotionally capable of providing him a stable home. I raised his father alone after my husband died in 1998. My son grew into a good man, loving, honest, selfless, until he was taken from us. I will not let his child suffer the same fate. Please understand, Samuel is not just my blood. He is my last link to the life my son built. I saved him once from the water. I will save him again from the system. Sincerely, Margaret Whitmore. I printed it out, sealed it in an envelope, and slid it under the door of Child Services the next morning. It wasn't official procedure, but sometimes love has to break protocol. When I returned home, there was another envelope on my porch. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten in looping cursive, the same handwriting that once signed thank you cards and grocery lists. Inside, a single sheet of paper. You can't protect him forever, Margaret. He's mine. No photograph this time, just that one sentence. The ink was smudged at the edge, as if someone had written it in the rain. I folded the note carefully and locked it in Michael's journal. Then I looked out at the lake again, still, glassy, unbothered. But I knew better. It had already tried to take one life, and I feared it wasn't finished. I woke up the next morning to the sound of knocking. Not the gentle kind, but firm, official, impatient. When I opened the door, Detective Nora Keaton stood there with another officer and a folder under her arm. Behind her, the mist from Silent Lake drifted low and pale, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore," she said. "May we come in?" I nodded. My pulse was already racing. They sat at the kitchen table, the same place where she'd shown me Michael's car photos, where I'd read my son's journal, where my life had started to unravel piece by piece. "This isn't about Vivian's arrest," Nora began. "It's about the baby." My heart clenched. "What about him?" "We ran the DNA tests." She hesitated. "The child is your biological grandson, Mrs. Whitmore. Samuel is Michael's son." For a second, the world went silent. The sound of the refrigerator, the rain, the ticking clock, everything vanished. When I found my voice again, it was barely a whisper. "You're sure?" She nodded. 100%. The tears came without warning. Relief and grief tangled together until I couldn't tell them apart. My boy had left something behind: a heartbeat, a legacy, a reason to keep breathing. But before I could fully absorb it, Nora continued. "There's more. The same test confirmed that Vivian gave birth alone. The umbilical cord was tied with common string. No hospital record, no birth certificate. It was all done in secret." I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. She hid it, all of it. "Yes," Nora said softly, "and now that we can confirm who the baby is, the court will want to determine custody, which means Child Services will be deeply involved." That same afternoon, Aline Foster returned the clipboard woman with the professional smile. Only this time, her tone was sharper, more cautious. "I've received the hospital report," she said, sitting primly in my living room. "Since you are the child's next of kin, you have the right to petition for temporary custody." "I don't want temporary," I said. "I want him home." "That's not how the process works," she said evenly. "You'll need to complete several evaluations: psychological, financial, environmental. There will be background checks, home visits, and mandatory parenting classes." I raised Michael. He was a good man. "I don't doubt that," she said. And yet I could hear it, the bureaucratic distance, the quiet skepticism of someone who saw too many broken families trying to patch themselves together. That night, I went through the house like a woman possessed. I scrubbed floors, cleaned out closets, washed curtains, replaced light bulbs. By midnight, I'd turned Michael's old bedroom into a nursery: yellow walls, a wooden crib, soft blue blankets. The smell of baby powder hung in the air, and for the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like hope. But even as I stood there, exhausted and aching, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The curtains fluttered slightly, though the windows were closed. When I looked outside, the mist over Silent Lake was thicker than ever, swirling, restless. Somewhere in that gray haze, I imagined Vivian standing there, smiling that cold, careful smile. The next week was a blur of appointments. I sat in a sterile office answering questions that sliced through me like blades. Do you have a history of depression? How do you handle stress? Would you say you tend to be controlling? They didn't see a grandmother. They saw a potential liability, an old woman trying to fight time, grief, and the system. But when they asked, "Why do you want to raise this child?" I didn't hesitate. "Because he's my son's son," I said. "Because I pulled him from death with my own hands. Because no one else on this earth will love him like I do." The young evaluator blinked, her eyes glistening just slightly before she looked back down at her notes. Days turned into weeks. Samuel gained weight. The hospital released updates every morning. Finally, one afternoon, Elise Monroe called me. "He's ready to go home," she said. "He's healthy, strong, but we can't release him without the court's approval." "Then I'll wait outside the courthouse if I have to," I said. And I did. The hearing was small, just me, Aline, and the judge, a gray-haired woman named Judge Penelope Clark, with eyes that seemed to measure everything and everyone in silence before speaking. She reviewed my file, asked about my income, my health, my home, my reasons. I answered every question with the calm conviction of a woman who had lost everything but refused to lose again. Finally, she set the papers down and looked at me. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "I've read your file. I've also read the report from Detective Keaton. It is my understanding that you risked your life to save this child." "Yes, Your Honor," she nodded slowly. "Then you've already proven your capacity to protect him." Tears blurred my vision. "Temporary custody is granted," she said. "You may take your grandson home." The gavel struck, and the sound echoed like thunder. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then I whispered, "Thank you." That night, Samuel came home. Elise helped me buckle him into the car seat, then kissed his tiny forehead. "You've got this," she said. When we reached the house, I carried him inside and laid him in his crib. He stretched, yawned, and fell asleep within minutes. I sat beside him in the rocking chair, listening to his breathing. It was soft and steady, a music I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. I should have felt peace, but instead, a chill ran through me. Because outside, in the fog beyond the porch light, I thought I saw movement, a dark figure standing at the edge of the lake, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it wasn't. But I whispered to the shadows anyway, "You'll never have him. Not while I'm alive." 3 nights after I brought Samuel home, I woke to the sound of footsteps on gravel. It wasn't the quick rhythm of a passing jogger or the heavy boots of a patrol car. It was slower, deliberate, a soft crunching sound, circling the porch, like someone who knew where the loose boards creaked. The baby monitor hissed quietly beside me. Samuel was asleep, breathing in that sweet, shallow rhythm babies have when they dream. I got up, wrapped my shawl around me, and moved toward the window. The fog over Silent Lake was thick again, a white shroud swallowing everything beyond the first row of pines. But through that haze, I saw it, a faint glint of metal, a car, parked just beyond the fence line, headlights off. And then, it blinked. Once, twice. A signal. My heart sized. I grabbed the phone and called Detective Nora Keaton. She answered on the second ring. "Claire? What's wrong?" "She's here," I whispered. "Vivian. She's outside. Stay on the line, don't move." I moved anyway. Old habits die hard, and fear doesn't erase a mother's instincts. I walked quietly into the nursery. Samuel was still asleep, tiny hands curled against his chest. I pressed a kiss to his forehead and whispered, "I'm right here, my darling. No one will touch you." Then I turned off every light in the house. By the time Nora's squad car pulled up 15 minutes later, the mysterious vehicle was gone. Only tire tracks remained, winding down the dirt road toward the lake. "She's watching you," Nora said grimly, sweeping her flashlight across the woods. "She wants to rattle you, make you doubt your safety." "It's working," I admitted. Nora turned to me. "Do you have a weapon, Mrs. Whitmore?" I hesitated. "My husband's old revolver. Unloaded. I never load it," she said flatly, "and don't hesitate to use it if she breaks in." The words hung in the night air, heavy and final. Over the next week, I barely slept. I triple-checked every window, every lock. I even nailed shut the basement door, just in case. Elise came by every morning to check on Samuel and me. "You look pale," she said gently one morning. "You need rest." I'll rest when she's behind bars. Elise looked uneasy. Do you think she'd really come here? With the police watching? She came back to the lake, didn't she? She didn't answer. 3 days later, another letter came. This one wasn't in an envelope. It was wedged under my front door, the handwriting scrawled and trembling. You think you've won, but you stole what's mine. You'll pay for it. Nora took the letter for evidence, but her face told me what she wouldn't say aloud. Vivian wasn't far. That night, I sat in the rocking chair beside Samuel's crib, holding the revolver in my lap. The old clock ticked beside me, the sound like distant thunder. Outside, fog pressed against the windows. Somewhere, a dog barked once, then silence. And then, faintly, the sound of something scraping against the porch. I stood, every nerve on fire. The scraping stopped. Seconds later, a knock. Soft, deliberate. 3 times. I lifted the revolver and aimed at the door. Who's there? Silence. Then, a voice. Low, calm, familiar. Claire. It's me. My breath caught. Vivian. I stepped closer to the door, heart pounding. Go away, I said. The police are watching. Oh, I know, she replied softly. You've been busy, talking, accusing. You think you're clever, but you don't know everything. I could hear the smile in her voice. What do you want? My son, she said simply. And what's mine? He's not yours. He's Michael's. Which means he's mine, too. He's your victim, I snapped. You tried to kill him. A pause. Then, quietly, you don't understand what Michael did to me. I gripped the handle tighter. You murdered him, Vivian. She laughed low, brittle, almost unhinged. He killed me first. You just didn't see it. The words chilled me to the bone. Leave now, or I'll... The sound of a car engine roared in the distance, headlights sweeping across the windows. Police. When I looked back, Vivian was gone. Nora searched the perimeter again, found fresh footprints by the porch, smaller than mine, leading toward the woods and vanishing at the edge of the lake. She's playing a game, Nora said, but she's running out of places to hide. I don't want games, I said. I want it over. We're close, Nora promised. We'll catch her soon. But as I stood there on the porch, clutching the baby blanket against my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that the lake itself was watching me, holding her reflection somewhere beneath its still surface. Some nights I swear I hear her whispering my name in the fog. And sometimes I answer back. By mid-November, Silent Lake had turned colder, a flat sheet of steel under a sky the color of old bruises. The air smelled of wet pine and something else I couldn't name. Tension. Samuel was growing fast. He'd begun to smile in his sleep, to reach for my necklace when I held him. Sometimes, when the light hit his face just right, I could almost see Michael in him. The same nose, the same quiet strength. But even in those soft moments, fear never left me. Every shadow in the yard felt alive. Every rustle in the woods sounded like a footstep. I knew she wasn't gone. That afternoon, Detective Nora Keaton called. We got a hit, she said. Vivian's name just popped on a motel registry in Charleston. Fake ID, but the handwriting matches the letters she left you. My pulse quickened. So you found her? Not yet. She checked out before we arrived. But there's more. She made a phone call from the motel to a prepaid burner. The same number that sent you that first threat. My hand went cold. She's planning something. Exactly, Nora said. And we're going to let her think it's working. 2 days later, I was summoned to the station. When I arrived, Nora and her partner, Officer Daniel Cortez, had a map spread across the table, the lake, the surrounding woods, every road in and out of Benton County marked in red ink. She'll come back here, Nora said. This is where everything began. The lake, your son, the baby she's tied to it psychologically. People like her return to the scene of their sins. I stared at the map. My house was just a small dot on the northern ridge of the lake. Across from it, at the southern bend, was an old boathouse abandoned for years. She'll come for him, I said softly. For Samuel, yes, but this time we'll be waiting. That evening, I couldn't sit still. While Samuel slept, I packed a small bag, diapers, milk, extra clothes. I didn't know why. Instinct, maybe. The kind of instinct that comes from being both a mother and a survivor. At 10:47 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Hello, Claire," Vivian said. Her voice was smooth, almost cheerful. "Long time." I froze. "You think you've won," she continued. "You think you can raise him like nothing happened, like Michael didn't lie to both of us." I forced my voice to stay calm. "Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. Please. Don't patronize me," she cut in. "I loved him, Claire. But he used me. He used both of us. You really want to know why he changed that will?" Silence stretched between us. "Because he wasn't protecting me," she whispered. "He was protecting you." "What are you talking about?" "Come to the boathouse at midnight," she said. "If you want the truth." Then she hung up. I called Nora immediately. "She called," I said breathlessly. "She wants to meet me at the old boathouse." Nora didn't hesitate. "Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. We'll set a trap. You'll wear a wire. We'll have snipers in position, back up within 50 yards. "No," I said quickly. "Not while Samuel's here. She knows where I live. If she suspects the police are involved, she might—" "She won't," Nora interrupted. "We'll make sure he's safe. Officer Cortez will take him and stay with Nurse Elise until this is over." I wanted to argue, but I didn't. For once, I trusted them. At 11:30 p.m., I stood on the edge of the lake, the air slicing cold against my skin. Nora adjusted the tiny transmitter on my blouse. "Remember," she said, "keep her talking. We need her confession. And if she has a weapon, press the button 3 times. We'll come in." I nodded. "You ready?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I'll do it anyway." The boathouse loomed in the distance, dark wood rotting from years of neglect. The water lapped quietly beneath the dock, rhythmic and cold. Inside, the moonlight filtered through broken slats. The air smelled of mildew and gasoline. "Vivian?" I called softly. A shadow moved near the back. She stepped out thinner now. Her hair hacked short and dyed chestnut brown, but her eyes were the same, wild, calculating, desperate. "You came," she said. "I want this to end," I replied. "So do I." She smiled slow and wrong. "Do you know what it's like to carry a secret so heavy you can't breathe? Michael wasn't who you thought he was." I stayed still. "He loved you. He used me," she hissed. "He promised me the world, then changed everything when he found out about the baby. He told me the will was for protection, but it was really to trap me, to make sure I'd never get free. He wanted to protect the child," I said. She shook her head. "He wanted to punish me. You both did." Her hand slipped into her jacket. For a split second, moonlight caught the metal. "A gun. Vivian, please. Don't," she whispered. "Don't pretend you care. You hated me the moment we met. That's not true." She raised the gun. "Then prove it. Put the baby down." "He's not here." Her eyes flicked, confused. "You're lying. I left him with someone safe." "Safe?" she repeated, laughing bitterly. "There's no such thing." She took a step closer. "Tell me where he is, or I swear to God." That's when I pressed the button. Once, twice, 3 times. A faint crackle from the transmitter. Then, from the darkness outside, Nora's voice. "Move, move, move." Lights exploded through the windows. Shouts echoed. Vivian turned, firing wildly. The bullet shattered the wood near my head. Then another shot. Louder. Final. Vivian collapsed, the gun slipping from her hand. I froze, trembling. Nora rushed in, shouting for medics. But I already knew. It was over. The woman who'd killed my son, who'd tried to drown his child, who'd haunted my nights for months, lay motionless on the floorboards of the boathouse. Outside, the dawn was breaking. The lake was silent again. For the first time, truly silent. Hours later, I sat in the hospital, Samuel asleep in my arms. His breathing was soft, steady. Nora came in quietly. "She's gone," she said. "You're safe now. Safe." A word I hadn't believed in for so long. I looked down at Samuel's tiny face, then out the window toward Silent Lake. Michael's lake. Our lake. Maybe it could finally be peaceful again. "Detective," I said softly, "do me a favor. Anything. Make sure her grave is far from his." Nora nodded slowly. "I'll see to it." Outside, the morning light spread over the water, pale and golden, the kind of light that promised, after all the darkness, that life could begin again. It's strange how peace can feel heavier than fear. After months of adrenaline, grief, and sleepless nights, silence itself became unbearable every quiet moment, reminding me of the storm that had finally passed. The police called it self-defense, though I hadn't fired a shot. Vivian's death was ruled justifiable use of force during an armed standoff. The headlines faded in a week, but the consequences lingered not in the papers, but in the small, invisible ways that trauma seeps into your bones. Detective Nora Keaton came by one last time before closing the case. Her usual sharpness had softened into something like friendship. "She's gone," she said gently. "It's over." "No," I said. "It's never really over, but maybe it's finished." Nora nodded. "You saved a life, Mrs. Whitmore. 2, if we count your own." At the courthouse a month later, Judge Penelope Clark smiled at me from the bench. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "we've reviewed every report, the psychological assessments, the social service notes, the home visits. You've done more than we ever asked of you." My heart hammered in my chest. "Therefore," she continued, "I'm granting you full and permanent custody of Samuel Michael Whitmore, with the option to proceed with legal adoption." The gavel struck. For a moment, the world fell perfectly still. Elise squeezed my shoulder from behind, whispering, "Congratulations, Grandma." But it wasn't victory, I felt it was grace. Something deeper, quieter, sacred. That night, I took Samuel home, not as a ward of the state, not as a temporary charge, but as my grandson, my family. We stood on the porch together as snow began to fall, soft and slow, covering the scars of the past months, the footprints, the blood, the memories. I whispered into his ear, "You're safe now, my darling, truly safe." His tiny fingers curled around my thumb. That small touch held more power than any courtroom verdict or police file. It was a vow, his trust, and my promise never to fail him. As the months passed, our days settled into something that almost felt like peace. Mornings began with laughter and baby babble. Afternoons were quiet naps in the rocking chair. Nights the long, tender kind, where you measure love by heartbeats and breaths. But sometimes, when I walked by Silent Lake, I still heard echoes, the splash of a suitcase sinking, the distant wail of sirens, the voice of a woman who'd lost her soul to greed. It reminded me that evil doesn't always come as a stranger. Sometimes, it sits at your dinner table. Sometimes, it calls you Mom. One spring morning, Nora visited again. She'd been promoted to lieutenant. "Thought you'd like to know," she said, handing me a thin folder. "The estate finally cleared. The insurance, Michael's assets, everything he left is now in Samuel's name. You're his legal guardian and trustee." I looked at the papers, at the long list of numbers and signatures. "Money can't fix what she broke," I said quietly. "No," Nora said, "but it can build something new." She was right. I used part of the inheritance to restore the local orphanage, renamed it the Whitmore House, in honor of Michael. Children played there now, their laughter echoing across the same lake that had once been a graveyard of secrets. At night, I sometimes read Michael's old journal, not for pain, but for remembrance. The last page, once stained with tears, now feels like a benediction. "If anything happens to me, don't lose faith, Mom. Protect my child. Let him know I loved him before I ever met him." I whisper back, "He knows, my love. He knows." Years later, Samuel grew strong and kind, the kind of boy who helped the old man next door carry groceries, who laughed easily, who loved the water despite everything it once took from us. One summer afternoon, as we stood by the shore of Silent Lake, he tugged on my hand. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart? Why do you always look at the lake like you're listening?" I smiled faintly. "Because sometimes it talks back." He tilted his head. "What does it say?" "That love is louder than fear," I said. "And that no matter how dark the water gets, light always finds its way back." He grinned, proud of the answer though he didn't yet understand it, and tossed a pebble into the lake. The ripples spread outward, gentle and endless. And for the first time in years, I felt no ghosts in the mist, only peace. As night fell, I stood on the porch with Samuel asleep in my arms, the stars reflected in the water like a promise. I thought of Michael, of the life stolen, the life saved, and the one still unfolding before me. Love had carried us through the fire and brought us home again. And as the last wind swept through the pines, I whispered into the quiet, "Rest now, my son. Your boy is safe. Your story is complete."